Welcome back, Rio Grande Guardian viewers. I'm very pleased to say we have yet another special guest. We don't do anything else, but have special guests on the show. Jonathan Stevens, who is Senior Managing Director for Teach for America RGV.
Thanks for having me, Steve. It's great always to chat with you.
Great to chat with you. So we'll start, because some folks will not have heard of Teach for America. Tell us about Teach for America specific to the Valley. When did you start down here, your mission statement, etc.?
Sure. So Teach for America, we're all about realizing the full potential of every child who's in the classroom here in the Rio Grande Valley. And so we believe that it takes talented leaders in schools, leading school systems in our community to commit to unlocking that potential of all kids. And the reality is that there are a lot of barriers that exist to students achieving their dreams, achieving all of their full academic potential. And so Teach for America was founded on this premise about how do we bring that talent into education. How do we bring people together to work in service of students? So Teach for America has been here in the Valley for a while, since 1991, and we've evolved over the years what we do in our programs. But I always tell people that the common DNA at each era of Teach for America is that belief that every child deserves an excellent education, and that's why our vision statement hasn't changed since Teach for America was founded. That until that day, that all children achieve that excellent education. And so specifically, what we do is we find, develop, and we grow talent. And so typically, that talent was new into the education field, and so we're known for bringing in new individuals who have that passion for working with students, have strong leadership skills from other experiences. And we provide that intensive upfront training, and then that ongoing training when they're a new teacher. One exciting program that is a core to our work now is also we have a tutoring program called the Ignite Fellowship. And a lot of people don't know about that as much because that came out of COVID specifically, where we saw that there was missed learning for students. And we said, hey, we know how to find talented people, bring them in education. We know how to run programs. We know how to grow programs. And so we've grown here, Ignite, to be one of the largest tutoring programs across the country in Teach for America. We're working with 3 school districts right now, and it's working with middle school students on math and reading, on accelerating their learning. And our newest version is working on mentoring. And how do you help 8th grade students think about their college and career options so they make choices for high school? And so we run our teaching core, we run our tutoring core, and then we also run our programs with our former members called our alumni, where we grow their career over time. We want people to really think about long-term, how do they impact from a classroom, from a school system, and from a community? How do they grow their leadership so that we can continue to evolve and change our educational system? Because the reality is, what it means to achieve an excellent education is very different now than when Teach for America started. Now we're thinking about how do students become college, career, military ready, and how do we need to change the way that we do things in our public schools? And so that's what Teach for America's work is in this next phase, is really how do we work with school districts? How do we continue to bring in great talent and orient towards the real outcome for public education is that students are able to achieve their dreams because of college and career that they can access.
So if Teach for America came into the Valley in the early 90s, where did it start in the US and how long was it going before it came here?
We were way back at the beginning. It started the year before in a couple cities. And so the expansion in Texas in 1991, in Houston in the Rio Grande Valley, that was one of the first expansions. And there were a group of community leaders, some of these community leaders who are still champions of education here, who saw on the news, saw this thing, Teach for America, and said, hey, let's do this Valley style. This is what it would look like, and started that partnership back then.
Can you give a shout out to who those folks were?
So I can give a shout out to Tony Aguirre, one of the McAllen City Commissioners. I know he was part of that group of businessmen, some others, who've passed on and are not with us anymore, but many others who were started that coalition that formed to bring Teach for America here.
So myself not being an expert, but just viewing your group, each year around this time of the year, I always think of Teach for America as bringing potential teachers to our region, and they teach here. So what percentage come from outside the Valley, and what percentage do they fall in love with our region, and do they stay?
Yeah, and so I think this has changed over time because the needs were very different in the 90s and the 2000s, where it was all about talent, bringing in talent. We still bring in some talent, but we've changed the number of students that are graduating high school. We've changed at the university level the students who are qualified to become amazing teachers with Teach for America. So now Teach for America predominantly has members who are from our region, because we've been improving our educational system. We have more people now. So now Teach for America's work is how do we bring people who maybe weren't thinking about going into public education? Because the reality is we still don't have enough people who want to go into public education, and how can Teach for America divert them on their path? And if they have the experience of being a student here in classrooms and know the community, we can accelerate their training even faster sometimes, so that they can get on their pathway as a teacher, and then ultimately want them to be a leader, right, long-term in the education. So about 80% of our members now have ties to the Valley, either from high school or college. And so we have many former members who've stayed here. I count myself in that group. So I moved here in 2006 with Teach for America. Hadn't even been to Texas before when I moved here. And now, almost 19 years later, I'm still here. So I think Teach for America is a really mixed group of individuals, but that shared commitment towards doing what it takes to find solutions to the barriers that exist that students are not achieving, their full potential as students and in life.
You mentioned COVID earlier. How has that impacted the teacher, the industry? How has it impacted education? What challenges has it brought to bear on you and your organization?
Yeah, so I think some of the challenges of COVID were due to COVID, and I think some were they illuminated trends that were existing before COVID. And I'll give one example is the changing generational desires and demands and interests. And so this is impacting all industries, some faster than others. And so people in other industries probably have seen, younger people are from a different generation. They've had access to technology since they were very, very young. The way that they get information, the way that they purchase things, find things, the way they went to school. If you think about someone graduating college now who's 22 this year, they would have been several years in high school during COVID now and could be graduating college. And so their lived experiences, their desires, their hopes are going to be different coming into the workplace. Some of those are amazing assets for any profession. They're going to be adaptive. They're going to have problems. They want to help their community because they were stuck at home in their community. And there also might be some challenges. And so recruiting people into the education field is different because people have a lot more flexible way they've learned, a lot more access to technology and different things that typically the way we've trained teachers, the way we've set up classrooms, haven't always adapted as quickly. And so I think that's one of the challenges that anyone in the education sector is either facing or will be facing, is how do we recruit and train people who learn differently, who have different preferences, who want to do things differently. And at Teach for America, I share with school districts, because we have a new cohort each year, we have to learn quickly, because if the old ways we were recruiting are not working, we have to change it. If the way we are training is not as effective, we have to change it, and we have the ability to do that. So we're constantly trying to share what are the ways we can blend technology. How can we have messages that are going to resonate with this younger generation? And how can we then bridge some of the things employer, school district, they might need? How do we help supplement and prepare them to do that handoff, right, that we're going to pass them along to you as an employer? So I'd say that's some of the biggest change that we're seeing in education. And then I'd say the second piece is then how are we growing and retaining educators? And so when there's certain public messaging out there that might discourage people from becoming a teacher, that could be true when they're in the classroom as well. If they're not feeling like they are having certain autonomy to make choices, or they're not feeling like they're growing in their career, that means compensation, but it also means responsibilities, other opportunities. We need to think about how we reorient and keep those top teachers. And so that's also work at Teach for America. Because we have so many former members, we're trying to work with them. What are the things that incentivize them to stay and grow in their career? And how do we have those conversations with school districts to ensure that that's true for all educators?
So as you bring up the subject of technology, almost every story we do today, we're thinking about the potential impact of artificial intelligence, AI. Has it impacted your group or the teachers generally yet?
I think it impacts everyone, even if you're not aware. I would say it impacts it from the fact that if students are in a university and they're learning how to use AI, either officially or unofficially, it's influencing how they learn, how they communicate. I think it's impacting how people find information. You go and you try to buy a ticket to something on a website, you're going to be interacting with AI chatbots. But I'll give you one example of how we're incorporating it at Teach for America. One of the things that our teachers do, since they in general are not certified, we work with the certification program and they have to go through all the steps. And so there's a lot of details, a lot of critical steps in a licensure process like that. And so we are piloting this year an AI feature where they'll be able to interact and get a lot of that information, because that's how they're getting information if they want to, book travel somewhere, they want to find other stuff. And so a really complicated, difficult step to becoming a teacher, how can we use AI to help support them? And so that's an example of how we're trying to incorporate and adjust that. And then the other thing that I think we're thinking about, and we're moving slower, but we're moving in the direction, how do we train teachers in the pedagogy of involving AI into the classroom and the work that they're doing in an age-appropriate way that's aligned with curriculum and aligned with state standards? Because students can go figure it out on their own, or we can support them in how they're doing that. And when we look at globally in other education systems, there are other ones that are further along than we are. The technology is already out there. And so it's not about resisting it or a yes or no, we like AI. It's more about how do we use the school environment to structure and support them so that they're equipped to be able to compete with anyone around the world.
Thank you for that. So on to the main reason we wanted to connect with you today. You have got a very big event coming up, and that's why we really wanted to meet up with you to do a preview, your annual gala, your big fundraiser of the year. Tell us all about that.
Yeah, and we appreciate, Steve, the opportunity to come here and share about our Honor Roll Gala each year. And we call it Honor Roll because there is a huge need to celebrate progress and success. The work of public education is challenging. The people who are working in it are, committing so much of their time and energy to it. We need to celebrate those bright spots. And so this year, we're excited to celebrate our educational champion this year is Dr. Annabelle Palomo. She is the founder of RGV College, which is focused on how do we meet the critical need of training and building a pipeline of nursing and other healthcare professionals. She also is a former public school teacher and principal, and so I think she's had education throughout her entire career as part of her work. Our institutional catalyst, we honor an organization because we know it doesn't just take individuals, it takes collectives of individuals. And this year, Region 1 Education Service Center. People who work in education might know what Region 1 does, but if you don't, you might not be aware that they're the body that helps support school districts to operate at their highest level. Whether that is how do you adapt new curriculum that's coming out, whether it's something for our smaller school districts, how do you have efficient business processes? How do you ensure that you set up transportation and food services? How are you communicating better with parents? If you have very small administrative staff, how can we pool our resources and learn our smaller school districts to stay in touch with our parents? Because we talked about changing generations. Parents are of a different generation of kids now too, and so the way that we need to interact, school districts to communicate are different. So we're excited to celebrate Region 1. And our third honoree is our Alumni Leadership. And so as I've mentioned, Teach for America has been around. Next year will be our 35th year. We have people who have made careers of impact, and we want to celebrate them. And this year, Pablo Mejia is our honoree. He's a former teacher, principal, and interestingly, his area is innovation and educational instruction and delivery. And so he has a career of how do you adopt those in the district level. And so we're excited to celebrate him. This year's event is on Friday, April 4th at the Mission Event Center at 6:30 p.m. And we'll have a cocktail hour, we will have a program, we will celebrate our honorees, we'll have an exciting live auction, and because it's a Friday night, we'll have a fun time on the patio, outside, afterwards, connecting, networking, mingling. And I always share, we want people who are inside education, leading school districts, who are really, their day-to-day work. We also want people who are business leaders, community leaders. All of us have a stake in education. And so this fundraiser helps us to tell those stories. It helps us to elevate the bright spots and raise funds for Teach for America and all the programs I've talked about.
Is there still a chance to get tickets, or have you sold out already?
So there's still a chance. And so all the information for this can be found at our website, www.teachforamerica.org/Honor Roll Gala. And I know you do a great job of linking stuff, so people can see that there. Follow us on any of our social medias at TFA RGV. And we still have tickets. If you're interested in supporting through sponsorships, other donations, you can reach out there. And spread the word. It is really, really important that we're coming together to celebrate these things. Again, I don't want to understate the challenges of teachers and all those working in education because of some of the challenges still coming from COVID, or just because of some of the generational shifts I've talked about. All of those things mean that it's so important to come together and celebrate, and that's why we love this event each year.
I want to go back, as you mentioned, and you're going to honor Region 1. Obviously, a lot of people in the community may have heard of the group, but they don't know much about it. But I would encourage anyone to just go along to their offices in Edinburgh, and you just will see how many programs are being run every day. There's teachers coming in all the time, learning best practices. It's an incredible resource, incredibly important group for our region that just doesn't get enough coverage.
Yeah, and I think bringing together different entities is one of the strengths, which is why I think that the title of the award, Institutional Catalyst, I think is appropriate, because they really are that spark. And I gave a few examples, whether it's observing that our smaller rural school districts don't have the same capacity as larger ones, so how can they pool resources? Whether it's thinking about the pace of change with instruction, the way that curriculum is delivered. There are so many digital materials that if you are a teacher trained anything before 5 years ago, you need support in how you're going to deliver that. Those are some of the challenges that Region 1 helps school districts solve. Right? And our school districts here in the Valley range from 40,000 plus students down to a few hundred students. So very, very different contexts. And Region 1 works not here in the Valley, but they also have expand up to Laredo. And so they're serving, I think it's 400,000 students on a daily basis are being touched in the Region 1 area.
Mm-hmm. Well, those are all the questions I had, John. Is there anything I've missed? Anything else you want to add?
I think it's just, so important that as a community here in the Rio Grande Valley, we've been able to see what happens when we commit to goals in education, whether it's goals around high school graduation, whether it's linking students to college opportunities. Now it's thinking about pathways to career, whether that's straight to career or through additional training after high school to career. The only way we do that is when people show up and they go to spaces with different organizations and they contribute. That might be their time, that might be their resources, financial resources. It might mean advocating and saying, this is something that's important to us. As I shared with you, I didn't grow up here. I didn't grow up in an example of where I saw how important education was to a community. And it is so obvious that that's been part of the success of the Valley. We see buildings going up, we see growth, and that only is possible to be sustained if we invest in our public education. And so that's what I really hope that everyone, especially your readership, right, is really focused on growth and development in our region, and just to remember and center education in all that they do.
Did you see a recent guest column op-ed that we ran from Daniel Silva from the Rio Grande Valley Partnership, where he said teaching education is the key component for economic development? That is exactly what you're saying today.
It is. And that means we need to bring them in, we need to support them, and we need to keep them. And that's a team effort. And so that's the good thing. The Valley, we're a team, we work together. And so let's support our teachers, let's support our students, because that's really what we're going to support our region.
Well, John, thank you so much. We've learned a lot, as we always do when we connect with you. Thank you so much for today's interview.
Of course. It was great being here. Thank you.